Well, good morning. Let's light some candles. Well, good morning and welcome to the Wednesday Pastor Check-In with Pastor Brian. That's me. Hope you're doing well, and gosh, I hope you are staying warm on these frigid mornings. Well, really the whole days have been frigid, and I know even coming this weekend, we are getting to some very cold, perhaps record cold lows. And so I really hope that you are staying warm. And please know, if you're needing some assistance in that regard, we are always available at the church to help you. Give us a call, and we'll try to figure out something to keep you warm and safe during these days. But nonetheless, let's try to warm up our souls a little bit as well as we consider these 5 marks of a Methodist. Last one this week. But before I get to that, don't let me forget, I want to make some announcements at the top of this video about what you can expect in the next couple of weeks. Next week, there will not be a Wednesday video, at least not a Wednesday Pastor Check-In with Pastor Brian. But there will be Ash Wednesday stuff. So we will have, if you hadn't heard this on one of our other broadcasts, we will have a noon Ash Wednesday service online, and then a 6:30 p.m. Ash Wednesday service online. So you pick which one works for you. And then all of the time in between that, well, 1 to 6, you'll be able to come to the church under the south awning and to be able to get an Ash Wednesday gift, as well as you'll have a chance to, if you so choose, pop inside to see one of your pastors and talk for a little bit, social distance. We want to have that time available for you. We're talking about even having the sanctuary open for prayer, and we'd be happy if you were here to do that. So not quite an open house per se, but it's a chance to come by. And also when you come by, you'll be able to bring your donations for the personal care items drive for Helping Hand. You may have seen this information in your newsletter. As we look at supporting a local nonprofit, one of the things that Helping Hand says that they really value are personal care items. So deodorant, soap, toothpaste, things of that nature, feminine hygiene products. Those are things that often people who are in need can't buy with their, with their food cards, with their food stamps. So that's one of the things that we're going to be fundraising or collecting for as well during the month of February. But our first time that you can drop by and bring those by is during our Ash Wednesday drive-through event. So I've said a lot there, but all of that is to say that next week there will not be a Wednesday Pastor Check-In with Pastor Brian, because we want to be focusing on Ash Wednesday in our services, and we'll be preparing for those. All right, I wanted to make sure I got that out at the beginning so I didn't forget. We've been going through these marks, a reminder of where we've been. The first mark is a Methodist loves God. Secondly, a Methodist rejoices in God. Third was a Methodist gives thanks. Fourth was a Methodist prays constantly. And fifth, a Methodist loves others. And once again, it is one of those that you would say, well, I hope every person loves others. But we're focusing particularly on what it means as a person from the Wesleyan perspective to love others as Christ does. And there's some really great insights in here about kind of the frame of mind which we use to approach loving others. And really it comes down to thinking about how sin affects our lives in such a way that it gives us the propensity to look inward and to do things for our own sake, even loving others. And I think some of the brilliance of what Christ does helps us through the first commandment, love the Lord your God with all your heart and love your neighbor as yourself, to know that it's God's love that we reflect to others. And if we think it's about us, it's really about loving one another as much as it is about loving us, which kind of helps us to get out of that trap of loving for our own sake, to be admired by others or have some sense of pride. And I love the way that Steve Harpshire puts this in here. To love God with our whole heart, mind, and being, we are brought back into the necessity of grace if we are to love in this way. Apart from grace, we will love other people conditionally. And worse still, we will set the conditions for giving our loves. When this happens, our discipleship becomes ego-driven rather than spirit-directed. The call to love others is a call to love radically, to love from what Wesley describes as a pure heart. And then he goes on to quote Wesley, talking about how you know it's a haughty spirit or pride, and how you know it's from being perfected in love. And I think a lot of the other things that we've talked about, praying and giving and thinking about others and rejoicing in God, those things are what give us the soil in our lives, in our spirits, to be able to grow good fruit, to produce good fruit, to know we are loving from a pure spirit. Now, there's the acknowledgement that we won't always get that right. It's that sin that causes us to love for selfish reasons, that also causes us to mess things up. And so we know that we won't always get that right. And I don't think Wesley is, when we talk about perfection and love, it's a journey that we're on. It's not a place we get to and we'll never backslide from, we'll never depart from. But it's knowing that we are always in the presence of God's grace, God's love. And it's always drawing us into more selflessness. And one of the cool things that I love that Steve Harper, using Wesley, takes us, a cool place that he takes us in this last mark of a Methodist, is understanding that really this idea of loving others is not an exceedingly high and noble cause. I mean, it actually certainly is noble, but it's not something that only the most pious achieve. And in fact, it's most often achieved through ordinary living. I know a few weeks ago in Pastor Tim's, one of his devotions, he talked about ordinary time and how most of the Christian year consists of ordinary time. That is time that is not marked by a liturgical season, Advent, Lent, Easter, Epiphany. Most of the time in the Christian year is ordinary. And that in that ordinary, there is something extraordinary that happens. And so, when we talk about love, it's a kind of understanding that is ordinary holiness. We think about who Jesus talked to, or who Jesus asked people to be. He talked to ordinary people. He talked to fishermen and asked his disciples, go be fishers of people. He talked to, the stranger. He talked to even some of the outcast kind of people, but they were still ordinary people. We sometimes think that in order to love, we must be non-human. We must ourselves be divine. But instead, we are ordinary people who reflect the light of the divine and bear fruit that is not our own. What a wonderful and extraordinary kind of thing. Lastly, the way that this book ends is reminding us that lastly, what this chapter does at the very end, what Steve Harper really ends the book with, is a Charles Wesley quote. You may know that Charles Wesley was the brother of John Wesley, the sort of founder of Methodism. And Charles Wesley, in his own right, was a founder of Methodist hymnody, in writing lots and lots of hymns that express the Wesleyan way. And in knowing that a disciple is to love others, that's at the foundational part of what it means to have this identity as a Christ follower and a disciple. Charles Wesley enjoins such ordinary love with these words: summoned my labor to renew, and glad to act my part. Lord, in thy name I do my work, and with a single heart. I love the image of acting our part, because it both speaks to the ordinary work that we do, but also how we all have a special part in doing ordinary, extraordinary work of love. I hope as we have gone through these marks of a Methodist, you have seen it as a work on your spirit, a work on your identity as not only a Christian, but as we are together, United Methodist Wesleyan Christians. It's just a particular way of looking at being a Christian. It's one that I have grown to love. I have grown to really take to heart, because it is a ministry of the heart which leads us outward and upward. Hope you're doing well. We're going to continue as we head into Lent. Of course, we won't meet next week. We won't have this next week. But I've got some ideas about how we can journey through Lent together. And so if you have any ideas, I would love for you to drop them below. What would you like to hear? What would you like to do during your Lenten season? I hope you've considered what you might do as a spiritual practice yourself, or even giving something up or taking something on. But we'll talk more about that in the coming weeks. Drop a line, let us know that you're here, accounted for, and that you're doing well, or if you have any prayer concerns. Good to see you, and God bless.